Okay? Hi, YouTube junkies. I'm Katie Couric. Thanks for checking out Primary Questions. One of the questions I asked the leading presidential contenders is, what is the biggest mistake you've ever made? Well, if someone asked me that, I'd have a million answers, but I'm not sure which one I'd give on national television. Anyway, we did ask the candidates that question. Here's what they had to say. Check it out. What's the biggest mistake you've ever made? How did you recognize it? And what did you do to change course?
The biggest mistake I made was believing that my personal disagreement with abortion and my view that abortion was wrong, that somehow I could accommodate my personal view that abortion was wrong with a public view that other people should be able to make up their own mind and that government wouldn't play a role. That, in my view, was a mistake. It became apparent to me when a bill reached my desk that would have created new life and destroyed it, and I simply could not sign it. It was unacceptable to me to be associated with the destruction of human life. And I recognized that. I therefore wrote an op-ed piece in the Boston papers explaining that I was wrong in the past, that I'd made a mistake. People are going to be very focused on any time an individual changes their view on an issue. But certainly people make mistakes in their life. I have. I will. I hope I keep learning from my mistakes. I'm only worried about people who make mistakes and don't admit them.
Do you have an example of people who make mistakes and can't admit them?
Absolutely, but I'm not going to tell you what they are.
The biggest mistake I ever made was being too aggressive. I was in the New Mexico legislature. I wanted to get a bill passed increasing the minimum wage, and instead of waiting and planning and talking to people, I just rammed it through, and it didn't happen. And because of that, for a year, New Mexicans didn't get an increase in the minimum wage. I went back, made another attempt, talked to people, became inclusive, didn't get aggressive, gave others credit, and I got it done.
Some time ago in my personal life, I didn't live up to my own standards there for a while. I was a single man, and looking back on it, I didn't always do the things that I ought to do. Didn't look at things the way I should have looked at them. What I did about it was try to change my life. Part of that was meeting and falling in love with my now wife, having a couple of children late in life, getting another chance to reevaluate things, and just try to be a better person.
I have to put my handling of healthcare among one of my biggest mistakes because it was so personally disappointing, but it was also such a tragic loss of time for so many Americans who needed health care, and we weren't able to deliver it because, frankly, I was new to Washington, and I didn't have the experience that I now have on both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue. So I didn't spend the time that I should have in really listening to people in the Congress who understood how you get big change done in America. If you want to get something done, you've got to figure out a way to get people together.
The one that comes to mind right away, and that's the one in not being able to anticipate the changes that were needed in child welfare and setting up the Administration for Children's Services early enough. All of a sudden, this young girl, Alicia Izquierdo, was killed. She was killed in a brutal way. She had been in and out of the child welfare agencies. She had been on our radar screen, and I hadn't fixed it in time. And I had time to do it. I could have done it in the time that I reformed the other agencies, and I felt terrible about this. And we made a very big reform based on it, but I always felt if we had done that earlier, maybe, just maybe, we could have avoided her death and maybe some other situations like that.
When I was a teenager, because I got involved with drinking and trying drugs. I was being raised by a single mom and by my grandparents. I was frustrated and didn't have role models out there that made sense. And so I engaged in a lot of destructive behavior. And I pulled out of it in my first couple of years of college because I started thinking outside of myself. I started thinking about people I met who were struggling a lot worse than I was. I didn't come from a wealthy family, but It was a middle-class family, and I never had to worry about whether I had enough to eat, or I never had to worry about whether I had a roof over my head. And I remember having a conversation with somebody and them saying to me that, you know, it's not about you, it's about what you can do for other people. And something clicked in my head, and I got real serious after that.
I've made a lot of mistakes sometimes, particularly in maybe giving people too much benefit of the doubt, keeping people in positions that should have been let go. There was a case in which I had a cabinet member that just simply did not mesh. Finally ended up terminating him. He ended up suing me, suing the state. It became very ugly, very unfortunate. We ended up winning the case, but it was a long, protracted, expensive, and embarrassing situation. I think what I had to do was to learn that if you've got particularly a personnel issue, the best thing to do, deal with it as quickly as possible, suffer the loss, try to clean up as much of the mess as you can, and accept that you can't make it all right.
I mean, if I had to say one, I'd probably say voting for the war in Iraq, which was it took time for me to recognize what a serious mistake it was. And what I did about it is announce to the world that I was wrong in exactly that language. And I learned a lesson from it, which is you have to be skeptical of information that other people give you.
If there was another one that wasn't as political.
It's completely
Yeah,
political.
yeah.
There's a
But I
reason.
just wonder if there's something in your life that you did.
This one is particularly hard. I can't think of anything else.
Well, I like to say the biggest mistake was when I raised my hand after I'd been on the USS Forrestal, and we had a terrible fire, and we were going back to the States, and they asked for volunteers to stay. I found out I ended up a couple of months later in a North Vietnamese prison camp, but that's a bit self-serving. Probably was when I attended a meeting with 4 other senators, with some regulators who were overseeing a guy named Charlie Keating, who was a big contributor and a big important economic factor in my home state. I shouldn't have done it. Ended up being found guilty of poor judgment, but to be honest with you, it was worse than poor judgment because I created an impression of impropriety, and the thing I value more than anything else is my honor.